Welcome to the Pardes channel. Today we explain Exodus chapter 15 in a clear and simple way, step by step.
To really get what's happening here, picture this. We are right at one of the most dramatically tense, awe-inspiring moments in all of human history. The Israelites have just walked across the Red Sea, on completely dry ground, and just moments after their feet hit the opposite shore, there's this deafening roar. Millions of gallons of water are collapsing behind them. The massive, towering walls of the sea have completely swallowed up the pursuing Egyptian army. Just like that, the absolute greatest military superpower of the ancient world is neutralized in seconds. And then there's just a sudden, shocking silence. So, you have to wonder, what happens in that silence? What is the very first reaction of over 1 million people who literally just went from terrified, fleeing slaves to a completely free nation?
Well, the text gives us the answer right away in verse 1. It says, "Then Moses and the Israelites sang this song to the Lord. I will sing to the Lord, for he is highly exalted. The horse and its rider he has hurled into the sea." Think about that. Their very first act of total freedom is a massive unified song of praise. They don't immediately start setting up tents. They don't hold a town hall to figure out their next political move. Instead, led by Moses, the entire nation bursts into poetry. This song, which spans the first 18 verses of the chapter, is actually one of the oldest and most famous victory songs ever recorded. And here's a super fascinating fact about it. In the original Hebrew Torah scrolls, this specific song is written in a really unique brickwork visual pattern. The words are actually staggered to visually look like the firm walls of water standing on the left and the right.
Right out of the gate, the song makes a really bold, incredibly physical declaration in verses 2 and 3. It says, "The Lord is my strength and my song. He has become my salvation. He is my God, and I will praise him, my Father's God, and I will exalt him. The Lord is a warrior. The Lord is his name." Put simply, the Israelites are declaring that God isn't just some abstract, distant concept. He is literally their strength and their physical salvation in real time. They describe God as a warrior. In Hebrew, the phrase is ish milchama, which literally translates to a man of war. Why use that specific term? Because to these former slaves, God literally just fought their battle. They didn't have the weapons, the armor, or the training to lift a single sword against the mighty Egyptians. The warrior God fought entirely for them.
Then, in verses 4 and 5, the song gets highly specific about the absolute destruction of Pharaoh's forces. Notice the heavy, vivid imagery they use here. The text says Pharaoh's chariots and his army have been hurled into the sea. Or talking about the very best of Pharaoh's officers, the elite, most terrifying commanders in the ancient world, completely drowned in the Red Sea. Verse 5 paints a remarkably weighty picture. The deep waters have covered them. They sank to the depths like a stone. This isn't just a military retreat, right? It's not a temporary setback. It's a total, irreversible defeat. That imagery of sinking like a stone really highlights the sheer physical weight of their heavy armor and the absolute finality of those deep waters closing over them forever.
So how exactly did this mind-blowing event happen? The song shifts to explain the mechanics behind the miracle in verses 6 through 12. Look at verse 6. "Your right hand, O Lord, was majestic in power. Your right hand, O Lord, shattered the enemy." Now, in the plain meaning of the text, the right hand is a universal symbol. It represents power, direct action, and ultimate authority. The song goes on to describe how God unleashed his burning anger, consuming the opposition as easily as fire burns up dry stubble. It beautifully elaborates on how it all worked. A simple blast of God's breath piled up the waters, making the violently flowing sea stand as firm as a solid wall, just holding it there before letting it all crash back down to swallow the enemy whole.
But right after this intense, vivid description of destruction, the song pivots so beautifully in verse 13. "In your unfailing love, you will lead the people you have redeemed. In your strength, you will guide them to your holy dwelling." This is such an incredible, intentional contrast. On one side, you have God's terrifying anger and destructive power pointed squarely at the oppressive enemy. But on the exact opposite side, you have his unfailing love and gentle guidance focused entirely on Israel. And this really matters because this duality, being the fierce protector against enemies, but the gentle, providing guide for his people, that is a core theme of the entire Exodus story. He is fiercely protecting them for one specific reason, so that he can lead them forward.
Listen really closely to the word redeemed used in that verse. To be redeemed literally means to be bought back. It means being completely rescued or saved from a state of intense slavery and imminent danger. The Israelites aren't just a bunch of random refugees wandering off into the wilderness. They are a distinctly redeemed people with a very specific destination. They've literally transitioned from being exhausted, enslaved brickmakers forced to build monuments in Egypt into a rescued people who are now being actively, intentionally guided by God's strength toward His holy sanctuary.
Now, as the song progresses into verses 14 through 16, it details this massive ripple effect. The news of this aquatic miracle is spreading like wildfire across the whole region. The text explains how the surrounding nations reacted with literal dread and terror when they heard what just happened to the supposedly invincible Egyptian army. Philistia is gripped by anguish. The chiefs of Edom are absolutely terrified. Moab's leaders are seized with trembling, and the people of Canaan literally melt away in fear. Why specifically call out these nations? Well, because these are the exact, formidable, terrifying nations that a group of former slaves would naturally be terrified of facing on their journey. But the psychological impact of the Red Sea victory has actually pre-fought their battles. It's already paralyzed their future adversaries with total fear.
Just before the song ends, verse 17 makes a beautiful prophetic declaration about the future. It says, "You will bring them in and plant them on the mountain of your inheritance, the place, Lord, you made for your dwelling, the sanctuary, Lord, your hands established." So, you see, the song isn't just about looking back at escaping Egypt, it's looking forward to being firmly rooted in God's presence. And then the song hits its triumphant climax in verse 18. The Lord will reign forever and ever. The Israelites had spent hundreds of years living under the absolute crushing rule of an earthly king, Pharaoh, who literally believed he was a god. But now, they are establishing a totally new reality. Human empires like Egypt are going to rise and inevitably fall, but the God who actually delivered them will reign for all of eternity.
The song then wraps up with a stark, literal summary of the whole event in verse 19. It points out the profound irony of what just went down. Think about it. When Pharaoh's horses, chariots, and horsemen went into the sea, the Lord brought the waters of the sea crashing back over them. But the Israelites, they walked through that exact same sea on dry ground. In just one single verse, the text perfectly captures the absolute difference in how the exact same body of water responded to the oppressors versus the oppressed. To one group, it was certain death. To the other, it was dry ground and miraculous salvation.
But wait, Moses and the men aren't the only ones singing. The celebration is about to get a whole lot louder as we move into verses 20 and 21. The text says, "Then Miriam the prophetess, Aaron's sister, took a tambourine in her hand, and all the women followed her with tambourines and dancing." Miriam steps up and leads the women in this responsive, joyful echo of the men's song, singing out, "Sing to the Lord, for he is highly exalted. The horse and its rider he has hurled into the sea." It's just this incredible scene of physical, overwhelming celebration that expands to include the entire community.
Let's pause and clarify Miriam's title here, because it's important. The text explicitly calls her a prophetess. That simply means a woman who speaks for God, possesses deep spiritual insight, and holds a recognized position of leadership. It also calls her Aaron's sister, which establishes her clear authority among the people. Now think about this for a second. Really picture this. When they were hastily packing up to flee Egypt in the middle of the night, terrified, baking bread that didn't even have time to rise, these women prioritized packing their heavy wooden tambourines. They had so much absolute faith in their upcoming deliverance that they literally packed musical instruments for a future party in the desert. That is amazing.
All right, so the narrative now tracks their physical movement away from the sea. Verses 22 through 25 show us what happens next. And honestly, reality hits hard. Moses leads Israel away from the Red Sea and straight into the desert of Shur. For 3 full days, they trek through the harsh, hot desert without finding a single drop of water. When they finally stumble upon a watering hole, there's water, but they can't drink it because it's terribly bitter. So the place gets named Marah, which literally translates to bitter in Hebrew. In just 3 days, they go from joyous singing and dancing to bitter grumbling against Moses. Moses cries out to the Lord, and God shows him a piece of wood. When Moses throws that wood into the water miraculously becomes sweet and totally drinkable. And it is right there, at Marah, that God establishes a decree to test them.
So how exactly does God respond to their bitter grumbling? Not with anger, surprisingly, but with a foundational promise. Right at that very spot where the bitter water was made sweet, God gives them a conditional promise in verse 26. He says, "If you listen carefully to the voice of the Lord your God and do what is right in his eyes, if you pay attention to his commands and keep all his decrees, I will not bring on you any of the diseases I brought on the Egyptians, for I am the Lord who heals you." Notice the heavy emphasis here on the strict literal requirement to listen and do what is right. God is essentially laying down the absolute ground rules for their brand new relationship.
Let's break down the exact step-by-step requirements given to the Israelites here to secure this incredible promise. There are 4 clear, actionable steps. First,
listen carefully to God's voice. Second, do what is right in His eyes, not what is right in their own eyes, but His. Third, pay close attention to His specific commands. And fourth, keep all His decrees. If they maintain this posture of strict obedience, God promises to be their ultimate healer. This wasn't just some arbitrary list of rules. God is basically telling them, I am your doctor, and this obedience is your health plan. These are the literal conditions for their physical survival in a completely unforgiving wilderness.
This creates a profoundly powerful comparison in the text between Egypt and Israel. Keep in mind, the Israelites had front-row seats to the literal diseases and terrifying plagues that afflicted the rebellious Egyptians. The boils, the darkness, the death, the complete destruction. God is actively assuring Israel that they absolutely do not need to fear suffering that exact same fate. If they simply obey, they will be protected and healed. The plagues were entirely for the oppressors. Divine health, sweetness, and protection are reserved entirely for the obedient, redeemed people.
And finally, we reach the last verse of the chapter, verse 27. Then they came to Elim, where there were 12 springs and 70 palm trees, and they camped there near the water. After the sheer terror of the sea, after that exhausting 3-day march through the dry desert and dealing with the bitter, undrinkable waters of Marah, they finally arrive at a literal, beautiful oasis. The text paints this remarkably clear picture of precise provision. Think about the numbers. 12 distinct springs, which perfectly matches the 12 tribes of Israel, providing a spring for every single tribe. And the rich shade of 70 palm trees, perfectly matching the 70 elders of Israel. God isn't just providing water here. He is providing tailored, abundant rest. Here, they finally get to stop, set up camp, and just rest near the sweet water.
When we take a step back, we can really see the complete dramatic transformation that God brought about in just one single chapter. At the very beginning of chapter 15, the context is pure chaos and adrenaline. They are looking back at the fresh memory of fleeing chariots and facing the overwhelming terror of the sea. But by the ending of the chapter, they are resting peacefully by the cool, refreshing waters and shaded palm trees of Elim. It's a remarkable, tangible demonstration of God physically moving His people from a place of profound distress and near death right into a place of total, abundant provision and peace.
So what can we take away from this historically massive event? Let's walk through 3 simple, actionable life lessons derived directly from the plain meaning of this text. First, don't forget to express gratitude immediately. Just like Moses and Miriam, when you experience a personal victory or rescue, don't just rush right into the next thing. Pause, sing, acknowledge it. Second, recognize God's protective power in your daily life. The exact same powerful hand that held back the roaring sea is the hand that provides the sweet water in the quiet desert. And third, understand that listening and obedience are deeply, literally connected to our overall physical and spiritual well-being.
Let's do a really quick recap of the incredible, chronological journey we just took through chapter 15. It started with Moses and the entire newly freed nation of Israel singing the grand song of the sea to celebrate the definitive defeat of Pharaoh. Then Miriam expanded that intense joy by leading all the women in dancing using the tambourines they faithfully packed. Shortly after, during their first real harsh desert test at the bitter waters of Marah, God promised them ultimate protection and healing in exchange for their obedience. And finally, God led them to a beautiful, quiet, and perfectly tailored rest at the oasis of Elim.
But as they're resting under the shade of those 70 palm trees, a deeply provocative question is just hanging in the hot desert air. They have promised to listen carefully and obey God's decrees. But they are still a vast, newly formed multitude of people at the very beginning of a very long journey. The deep desert beyond the oasis of Elim is unimaginably harsh, dry, and unforgiving. Will the Israelites actually be able to maintain this trust and obedience when the water runs dry again, when the food runs out, and when the circumstances get even more difficult?
Thank you for learning with us. If this helped you understand the chapter better, like, subscribe, and join us for the next chapter.